Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, coffee break sessions presented by Strategic Treasurer, covering foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader at Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee Break Session. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader here at Strategic Treasurer. And joining with me today is Paul Galloway, Senior Advisor at Strategic Treasurer. Paul, welcome aboard. So glad to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
You know, we've done a couple of topics already around payments and talking about ACHs, and it's been some great conversation with Craig Jeffrey, our managing partner, and I'm really excited about going through these next couple episodes with you. And today, what I'd really like to talk about is a little bit more, and we're kind of hearing more about it now. I think it's because we're getting closer to the timeline for it to kind of be a part of our everyday lives, is FedNow. So Paul, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and just go dive in right into this topic, and let's talk about, if you walk our audience through a little bit of explaining, what is FedNow exactly?
Yeah, FedNow is as soon to be rolled out. It's a Federal Reserve developed instant payment infrastructure. It allows for payments to occur by any size financial institution. So both businesses and individuals will be able to send and receive payments in real time. This is year-round, 24 hours a day. The initial launch is expected to take place sometime in July this year, and it's going to focus on core clearing and transaction settlements. There are expectations that there'll be other or further rollouts as they continue to develop this platform.
So I know that, one of the things, as I think you and I have discussed previously on another podcast, was talking about, everything's about speed, right? It's how fast, right? How fast can I get this money from point A to point B? How fast can I receive money from point A to point B? And just hearing that now, as we are going to see FedNow kind of roll out this summer, hopefully, and just kind of sit back and watch it, kind of see how this goes. Going through thinking about, the instantaneous payment cycle here. How does this service differ from traditional quote unquote faster payment processing?
What I think makes this a big deal is the Fed is stepping in and saying, hey, we need faster payments, and we're going to provide a secure payment infrastructure to do that. It's going to be 24/7 year-round. Unlike real-time payments or RTP, FedNow will reach all financial institutions, while RTP currently reaches a smaller portion of financial institutions, somewhere around 61% of all financial institutions or banking institutions that are out there.
So how long, has this been around for a while? Has it been something that's been an option available to folks, or is this FedNow just kind of open up the gateway for it to be a little bit more like broader, casting a broader net?
So real-time payments has been around for a while now. It's still relatively new in terms of payment rails, but it's a consortium of financial institutions that came together to develop this platform. Unlike those financial institutions, FedNow has that capability to reach all of them. So the small banks, I live in Iowa, and we have tons of small towns in Iowa because we're primarily an agriculture state, although we do have other businesses. A large portion of our state is dedicated to agriculture, and there's lots of small towns that support people in the rural locations in Iowa. And there's these little mom and pop banks that are sprinkled throughout our state. Well, these small banks are going to be able to participate in this. It's a big deal for these small financial institutions that haven't had access to something like this. It is something that I think is a significant step forward. I think it's just another evolution of the process to allow people to be able to send and receive funds in a real-time fashion.
So I think it's great to kind of bring up that point of everybody's now a player on this field, and and whether the size of the banks or the business that's being conducting, right? I think having that that ability to have those instant payments is really going to be a game changer for several banks, to where now they're playing in the same space as others. So speaking of everything from being, as you were talking about more domestically, let's think about things on a broader range. Are instant payments supported outside the U.S. like in other central banks?
So when we think about instant payments in context of FedNow, FedNow is a U.S. only based system. They intend to roll out, like I mentioned earlier, they tend to roll out additional functionality which may allow for additional applications. And when we think about governments, there's quite a few governments out there that are contemplating, something that would be more of an instant payment or central banks sponsoring things like this. So there are some systems that are in place out there in more developed locations or more progressive locations where acceptance of payments like this are rolled out. I think what we're going to see from a global footprint over time is the ability to go to an international basis is going to become something that is common.
So what are some considerations and benefits of the FedNow rollout in your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think about, businesses and individuals. I think whether you are a business or an individual, I think you need to understand your cash position, what you have for available liquidity. So whether it's me looking at my own financial position or it's a client that we're advising, I think of it in the same context. I take a look at my cash position on a regular basis. I know what levers I have to pull to be able to raise liquidity in times of need. Businesses need to do the same. And so it's important for businesses to be able to have the tools in place to have that kind of visibility, processes, procedures, systems that allow for visibility, allow for management, whether cash or liquidity, or the two together collectively. This is something that businesses and individuals have to have front of mind. The other thing that I think about is with the rollout, we talked about international payments or payments across borders. The application of this is going to become something that is more common. I think this is good. This allows for the acceptance, payment, or receipt of cash in a more timely manner. I think it's something that if you don't have cross-border payments or if you don't have an application for a non-bank financial, that it may fall flat. I'm not certain that's going to be the case with FedNow, given that RTP's been out for several years. I think we're seeing an increased adoption rate of the use of real-time payments. There are still limits in place on how much you can do with this type of activity. I think as adoption rates increase and with the Fed coming in with their infrastructure, I expect that those limits will be raised. I also expect that the adoption rate will also increase. So when you think about benefits associated with an instant payment system like this, real time, something that you can get now 24/7. You can make a payment on Saturday. You can receive a payment on Sunday. It doesn't matter the time of day. It doesn't matter the day of the week. It happens all the time when you utilize this kind of platform. So I think it's important to understand what that means. It also is a way for businesses to become really efficient and have control over their payables and receivables. It also will reduce the processing costs associated with making payments. The other thing that is kind of a benefit that is just kind of one-off that I've been thinking about is as an employee of an organization, and we receive a periodic paycheck associated with working for these organizations. These types of platforms like FedNow will allow for employees to have access to their paycheck a lot sooner. So if payday is today and an instant payment is made through FedNow, it happens right away. You have access to all of it, not just a portion of it. You don't have to wait until in the day. You don't have to wait for the bank to go through validation clearing process because this infrastructure allows for all that to happen securely, instantly.
Sounds great to me. Sign me up. I mean, who doesn't like to be paid like right now, right? There's no time like right now. So, well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. The great conversation around FedNow, just really kind of understand what it is, the benefits, and how this is going to change our lives overall. But I really appreciate it. So thank you. And to our listeners for tuning into this episode, thank you very much. If you have any questions, comments, or any feedback you'd like to share, please send us a note at podcast@strategictreasurer.com. Until next time, take care.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.